What happens when a successful black architect is refused entry to an upscale restaurant on his anniversary night? You won't believe how his quiet business card becomes the first move in a chess game that transforms discrimination into the sweetest form of justice. Let me tell you something about expectations and how quickly they can shatter like glass on concrete. My name is Marcus Johnson, and 20 years ago, I married the most incredible woman to ever grace this earth, Sarah. 20 years of her terrible cooking, her obsession with reality TV shows, and her habit of leaving coffee cups on every surface of our home. But I wouldn't trade a single moment of those 20 years for anything in this world. Here I am, striding through downtown in the pouring rain on a Thursday evening, clutching a bouquet of white roses that cost more than my first car payment. I'm 52 years old, rocking a custom-tailored navy suit worth $2,000 and holding reservations at Le Gourmet, the fanciest French restaurant in the city. You know the type, where they serve you a piece of fish the size of your thumb, drizzle some colorful sauce around it, and call it culinary art, while charging you more than your monthly cable bill. I've been planning this anniversary dinner for weeks, made the reservation personally, confirmed it twice, even spoke with the manager to make sure they had Sarah's favorite champagne chilled and ready. Sarah had been dropping hints about wanting to try this place for months, constantly showing me photos on her phone. "Marcus, look at these presentations," she'd say, eyes wide with excitement. "It's like eating artwork. Artwork that costs $300 a plate, but seeing that smile on her face, worth every penny." Le Gourmet sits on the corner of 5th and Main, like some European palace dropped into the middle of our city, all gleaming windows and gold trim that practically screams only certain people belong here. Through those massive windows, I could see crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than my car, tables covered in linen so white they'd make fresh snow look dirty. The whole place radiates that old money attitude that makes regular folks feel like they should apologize just for walking past. I checked my watch. 7 o'clock on the dot. Sarah would be arriving any minute in her Uber, fresh from spending the afternoon at her favorite salon. Even after 20 years, seeing her all dressed up still makes my heart beat faster than a teenager on his first date. The entrance to Le Gourmet looks like something from a royal castle, a massive oak door with ornate carvings that probably cost more than most people's entire dining room set. I straightened my tie, adjusted my cufflinks, and walked up those marble steps like I owned the place. Because tonight, I'm not just some guy, I'm a successful architect celebrating 20 years with the woman of my dreams, and I absolutely belong there. That's when I came face to face with Richard Stone. Imagine this, a 6-foot tall wall of superiority complex wrapped in a perfectly pressed black suit, gray eyes colder than a January morning, looking at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of his Italian leather shoes. The type of man who's never known what it means to work with his hands, to build something from nothing, to worry about making rent. Just standing there guarding the entrance like some fancy doorman at the gates of heaven. "Good evening," I said, pulling out my smartphone to show him the confirmation email. "I have a reservation for 7 o'clock under Johnson. Now pay attention, because this is where things get interesting." Stone didn't even look at my phone, didn't even pretend to check his reservation book or tablet. Just looked me up and down like he was inspecting damaged goods at a discount store. "I'm sorry, but we're completely booked tonight," he said with all the sincerity of a politician during election season. His voice dripped with that special kind of fake politeness that translates to, "You don't belong here. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at another establishment." I felt my eyebrows shoot up so high they nearly joined my hairline. "Excuse me? I made this reservation 2 weeks ago. I have the confirmation right here." I held up my phone again, making sure he could clearly see their fancy letterhead in confirmation number. "Our system must have made an error," Stone replied, still refusing to even glance at my proof. "Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do for you tonight." And that's when fate decided to really show its colors. A young white couple walked up behind me, couldn't have been older than 25, wearing jeans and sneakers that still had the store tags hanging off them. The woman wore a crop top that barely qualified as clothing, and the man's t-shirt had what looked like yesterday's lunch stained across the front. I watched in disbelief as Stone's entire demeanor transformed, like someone had flipped a light switch. Suddenly, he was all smiles and warm welcomes. Good evening. Right this way to your table. No checking for reservations, no questions asked, just immediate VIP treatment while I stood there in my expensive suit holding irrefutable proof that I had every right to be there. The irony was thicker than my grandmother's Sunday gravy. Here I was, a successful professional who could probably buy and sell this restaurant if I wanted to, being denied entry while two kids who looked like they wandered in from a college dorm party got the royal welcome. Hold on just a minute, I said, my voice taking on that tone that Sarah always says means someone's about to get an education. These folks didn't show you any reservation, but you're letting them walk right in. Stone turned back to me with a look cold enough to freeze boiling water. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. You're creating a disturbance for our guests. Creating a disturbance, as if asking to be treated with basic human dignity qualified as disorderly conduct. That's when his reinforcements arrived. Two security guards built like professional linebackers and an assistant manager whose face screamed, "I practice looking important in the mirror every morning." They formed a human barrier behind Stone, making it crystal clear that this wasn't just one man's prejudice. This was the restaurant's unspoken policy. "I want to speak to the manager," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the anger building inside me like a pressure cooker. "The manager is busy," Stone replied with a smirk that made me want to rearrange his facial features. "And I'm telling you for the last time, leave, or we'll have security escort you out." Right at that moment, Sarah's Uber pulled up to the curb. Watching my wife step out of that car was like seeing sunshine break through storm clouds. She was radiant in her red dress, her hair styled to perfection, carrying a small gift box and wearing the biggest smile I'd seen in weeks. Knowing what was about to happen to that smile, that's what really broke something inside me. "Hey, honey," she called out, practically gliding toward the entrance. "Sorry I'm running late. The salon was packed, but look." She did a little twirl, showing off her new hairstyle that probably cost more than our first dinner date 20 years ago. Then she saw the tension, the security guards, the crowd that had started to gather. That beautiful smile vanished faster than ice cream on a summer sidewalk. "What's happening?" she asked, looking between me and Stone with growing confusion. I put my arm around her shoulders, feeling her tense up as she sensed the hostility radiating from the restaurant staff. "They're saying we can't eat here, Sarah. Apparently, our reservation mysteriously disappeared from their system." Sarah looked at Stone with that expression I've seen 1,000 times in 20 years of marriage. The look that means someone is about to learn exactly why you don't mess with a woman who graduated top of her class at Howard University. "Lost in the system," she repeated, her voice taking on that calm before the storm quality. "My husband called personally 2 weeks ago. We're celebrating our 20th wedding anniversary tonight." Stone shrugged like we were discussing something as trivial as the weather. "Sorry, nothing I can do. I suggest you try somewhere else." By now, a small crowd had gathered around us. People were pulling out phones, whispering among themselves, sensing that something wrong was happening. A young college student with his camera already rolling spoke up loudly. "This is straight-up discrimination. It's 2024, man. How is this still happening?" Stone's perfect composure cracked just slightly. "Young man, this is none of your business." But it was too late. The word was out there now, hanging in the air like smoke. Discrimination. Sarah squeezed my hand tighter, and I could feel her trembling. Not from fear, but from pure, righteous indignation. "Is that what this is about?" she asked Stone directly. "Because we both know exactly what's happening here." That's when the owner himself decided to grace us with his presence. Henri Dubois emerged from his restaurant like some medieval lord surveying his kingdom. 60 years old with silver hair slicked back and a mustache that looked like it required its own maintenance crew. The kind of European arrogance that reminds you why some countries had revolutions. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked in a French accent so thick you could spread it on toast. Stone whispered something in his ear, and Dubois nodded like they were discussing nothing more important than the wine selection. Then he turned to me with a smile that never reached his eyes. "Monsieur," he said, drawing out the word like it was causing him physical pain, "I understand your disappointment, but my restaurant maintains certain standards. We cater to a very specific clientele." He paused, letting those words sink in like poison. Perhaps you would be more comfortable somewhere more. How do you say, accommodating to your kind? Your kind. Those two words hit me like a physical blow. In 2024, in a major American city, this man actually had the audacity to say, your kind, to my face, in front of my wife, in front of a growing crowd of witnesses. The silence that followed was so complete, you could have heard a napkin drop. Even the traffic seemed to quiet down, like the whole city was holding its breath to see what would happen next. Sarah's hand went to her chest like she'd been physically struck. Did you just... This is private property, madame, Dubois continued, completely unrepentant. I decide who enters my establishment. The crowd erupted. Phones came out everywhere. People started recording from every angle. The college kid was live streaming, and I could hear him narrating. Y'all are witnessing actual racism happening right now in real time. This is unbelievable. I pulled out my business card and held it up where everyone could see it. Marcus Johnson, senior partner at Johnson and Associates Architecture. Remember this name. Dubois didn't even glance at the card. Monsieur, I don't care if you're the president himself. My answer is final. The crowd was growing larger and louder by the second. People were shouting about boycotts, about calling local news stations, about making sure this story spread across every social media platform. Someone started chanting, shame, 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 and others quickly joined in. Dubois was starting to look nervous, but he doubled down on his arrogance. This is private property. All of you need to leave immediately. But nobody moved. If anything, more people joined the crowd, drawn by the commotion and staying for the spectacle of justice unfolding. I took Sarah's hand, feeling the weight of every eye on us, every camera recording this moment for posterity. Come on, honey, we don't need this place. But Sarah wasn't ready to walk away. No, Marcus, she said, her voice carrying above the noise of the crowd. We're not just walking away from this. This man thinks he can treat people like they're beneath him and face no consequences. She turned to face Dubois directly. You're going to regret this. That's a promise. Dubois actually laughed, a short, dismissive sound. Threaten me? Madam, do you know how long this restaurant has been operating without problems? Nobody can touch me. Just then, an elderly white gentleman in an expensive suit emerged from the restaurant. Henri, what in heaven's name is going on out here? The entire dining room can hear this commotion. Nothing serious, Roger, Dubois replied casually. Just some people who don't understand our policies. Roger looked at me and Sarah, then at the crowd, then back at Dubois. You could actually see the moment of realization dawn on his face. Henri, please tell me you're not refusing service to these people because of their race. It's my business, Roger. I run it as I see fit. Roger shook his head, his disgust evident. Then I am no longer a customer of your establishment. He turned to me. Sir, allow me to introduce myself. Roger Carlyle, editor-in-chief of the City Tribune. Tomorrow, this entire city will know exactly what happened here tonight. Dubois' face went pale as uncooked dough. Roger, wait! You're misunderstanding the situation. But Roger was already walking away, phone pressed to his ear, already making calls to his newsroom. As we finally walked away from that scene, with the crowd still growing behind us and the camera still recording every moment, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. A burning, undeniable thirst for justice, not just for me and Sarah, but for every person who'd ever been made to feel less than human because of the color of their skin. I had no idea that night would change everything. Had no idea that sometimes the worst moments of your life become the catalyst for something truly extraordinary. But I was about to find out. That was just the beginning of this story. But trust me, what comes next will blow your mind. Stay tuned to see how this nightmare turned into something nobody could have predicted. 3 months, 94 days to be exact. That's how long it took for my life to transform from that of a respected architect into something resembling a character in one of those legal dramas Sarah loves to binge watch. My days became a hurricane of lawyer meetings, reporter interviews, and more social media notifications than a teenage influencer. That video the college kid captured, it didn't just go viral, it went nuclear. 2 million views in the first 7 days, 4 million by the end of week 2. People were sharing it from Atlanta to Anchorage, from Boston to Bakersfield. Black community forums turned it into a rallying cry. Civil rights organizations reached out offering support. Even celebrities were reposting it with captions like, "This is still happening in 2024. Wake up, America." Roger Carlyle kept his promise. The headline on the City Tribune's front page the next morning screamed, "Exclusive, Racism Served Fresh at City's Premier Restaurant." The article included quotes from multiple witnesses, a photograph of Du Bois with his finger in my face, and a scathing editorial about how some businesses were still living in the Jim Crow era while pretending to be bastions of sophistication. But that was just the appetizer. Within days, national news outlets picked up the story. CNN ran a segment titled "Dining While Black." MSNBC had a panel discussion about racial discrimination in upscale establishments. Even the late-night comedy shows got in on it, with one host joking, "At Le Gourmet, the only thing that's not French is basic human decency." Dubois tried damage control, of course. That man emerged from his restaurant on day 3 looking like he'd aged 10 years, sweating through his designer suit as he faced a forest of microphones and cameras. His PR team had clearly coached him on what to say, but the words came out sounding as authentic as a $3 bill. "Le Gourmet has always welcomed guests from all backgrounds," he claimed, reading from a prepared statement. "This unfortunate incident was a misunderstanding regarding our reservation system. We deeply regret any impression that might have been created to the contrary." The internet response was swift and merciless. "Boycott Le Gourmet" started trending within the hour. People began posting one-star reviews on every platform imaginable, many from folks who'd never even been to the restaurant. Food was excellent, racism was unpalatable, would not recommend became a popular format. Within 2 weeks, protesters were camped outside the restaurant's doors every single evening, holding signs with messages like "You're kind," "Humankind," and "Reservation for Equality," "Party of Everyone." The diversity of those protesters was what really struck me. This wasn't just black folks standing up. It was young, old, white, Asian, Latino, Native American. People from every background imaginable coming together to say this behavior wasn't acceptable in our city. Sarah and I would sometimes drive by just to see what was happening. The parking lot that used to be packed with luxury cars was sitting empty most nights. The valet attendants stood idle, scrolling through their phones to pass the time. The protesters would cheer when they recognized our car, waving and raising their fists in solidarity. One evening about a month in, we noticed something particularly satisfying. Richard Stone standing at that same door where he'd turned us away. Only now he was begging people to come inside. "Please, we have plenty of tables available. No reservation needed." The desperation in his voice was like sweet music. Corporate clients started canceling events. The Chamber of Commerce rescinded Le Gourmet's Business of Excellence award. The mayor's office announced they were reviewing the restaurant's business license for compliance with anti-discrimination ordinances. Even the food critics stopped showing up for reviews. I was sitting in my office one rainy afternoon, reviewing blueprints for a community center we were designing, when my assistant buzzed through on the intercom. "Mr. Johnson, there's a call for you on line 2. Someone named James Mitchell says he's calling about a business opportunity." The voice on the other end was smooth as butter and professional to the core. "Mr. Johnson, my name is James Mitchell. I represent a private investment group that's been following your situation with great interest." "I'm listening," I said, leaning back in my leather chair and staring out the window at the city skyline I'd helped shape over my 25-year career. "We specialize in what you might call opportunity acquisition. Our group identifies businesses that are experiencing significant public relations challenges and acquires them at favorable valuations." I had to laugh. "Mr. Mitchell, I design buildings for a living. You're going to have to use smaller words." There was a chuckle on the other end. "Fair enough. When a business is failing because the owner did something stupid, like, say, discriminating against potential customers, they often become desperate to sell before they lose everything. We buy these businesses at discounted prices and transform them." Now, I was starting to see where this was going, and the delicious irony of it made me sit up straighter. "And you think Le Gourmet might be one of these opportunities?" Our research indicates the restaurant's revenue has dropped by approximately 70% over the past 3 months. They've had to lay off half their staff. The owner is 3 months behind on his loan payments, and the bank is making noise about foreclosure. I spun my chair around, suddenly very interested in this conversation. What exactly are you proposing? We'd like to make you a proposition, join our investment group, help us put together a package to purchase the restaurant, give you the opportunity to turn that establishment into something that actually serves the community. The symmetry was so perfect it almost made me dizzy. The very restaurant that wouldn't let me through the front door might soon be mine to control. The tables weren't just turning. They were doing a complete 180. I'm very interested, I told Mitchell. Let's set up a meeting. 2 days later, I was sitting in a conference room downtown with 5 other investors, looking at financial statements that painted a picture of complete collapse. Le Gourmet was drowning in red ink. Revenue hadn't just dropped. It had fallen off a cliff. Dubois was behind on everything. Loan payments, supplier invoices, even payroll taxes. 6 months ago, the asking price would have been around $3 million, Mitchell explained, pointing to figures on a spreadsheet. Today, we can probably get it for less than half that. And you want me to be the primary investor? I asked, still trying to wrap my head around this opportunity that had literally walked up and knocked on my door. We want you to be the new owner, said Patricia Williams, the only other black person in the room. She was a restaurant industry veteran who'd opened 3 successful establishments across the city. This isn't just about buying a restaurant, Marcus. This is about making a statement, about turning a symbol of exclusion into a beacon of inclusion. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. The investment group would provide most of the capital, but I would be the majority stakeholder and public face of the purchase. The new owner, the man who went from being refused service to calling all the shots. There's something almost poetic about it, Patricia continued, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Justice served at the very table where injustice was committed. Over the next 2 weeks, we put together an offer that Dubois couldn't refuse. Not because it was generous, but because it was the only lifeline he was going to get. Every other potential buyer had run for the hills when they saw the public relations disaster they'd be inheriting. But I wasn't inheriting a disaster, I was buying my redemption. The lawyers handled most of the negotiations, but I insisted on being present for the final signing. I wanted to look Dubois in the eye when he handed over the keys to his precious restaurant. The man who walked into that conference room was almost unrecognizable from the arrogant restaurateur who'd stood in his doorway and told me I wasn't his kind of customer. This Dubois looked broken. His expensive suit hung loose on his frame like he'd lost 20 pounds. His perfectly coiffed silver hair was disheveled, and his hands trembled slightly as he signed one document after another. You're making a mistake, he said quietly as he signed the final transfer papers. This business will never recover from what happened. I smiled as I watched him sign away his restaurant. Mr. Dubois, you're absolutely right. This business as you knew it will never recover. But what comes next? That's going to be something beautiful. He handed me the keys without looking up. 40 years of his life's work, passed to me in a handful of metal on a cheap keyring. There's just one more thing, I said as we shook hands to seal the deal. I'm keeping most of your staff. His head snapped up so fast I thought he might get whiplash. What? Richard Stone, your hostess, most of your waiters and kitchen staff. They're skilled professionals who are excellent at their jobs. They just had terrible management. Dubois stared at me like I'd just told him I was planning to fly to the moon on a bicycle. You're going to rehire the people who worked for me? The same people who stood by while... I'm going to give them the chance to work for someone who believes in treating all customers with respect. I interrupted. People can change, Mr. Dubois. It's never too late to be better than you were yesterday. He stood up slowly, gathering his copies of the paperwork. I underestimated you, Mr. Johnson. Yes, I said, watching him walk toward the door with the slumped shoulders of a defeated man. You did. The next morning, I called a staff meeting. Every employee who'd worked at Le Gourmet was invited to attend. I wanted to give them a choice. Work with me under new policies or find employment elsewhere. No hard feelings either way. 23 people showed up in that conference room, including Richard Stone. The man who'd looked at me like I was something stuck to his shoe 3 months ago now couldn't even make eye contact. He sat at the far end of the table. staring down at his folded hands. I know this is awkward, I began, standing at the head of the table. Most of you remember me from that night in October. Some of you were there when I was refused service because of the color of my skin. The room was silent enough to hear a pin drop. You could practically feel the discomfort radiating from every person at that table. I want to be clear about something. I didn't buy this restaurant for revenge. I bought it because I believe this community deserves a place where everyone is welcome, where families can celebrate anniversaries and birthdays and achievements without worrying about whether they'll be judged by anything other than their ability to enjoy good food. I pulled out a folder and set it on the table. These are new employment contracts, better pay, better benefits, and a crystal clear anti-discrimination policy. If you choose to stay, you'll be working for an establishment that serves everyone who walks through our doors. If that's not something you can commit to, I understand, and I'll provide excellent references to help you find work elsewhere. Slowly, hands started going up around the room. The head chef, Maria Gonzalez, was first. Then the sommelier, David Kim. One by one, almost every employee raised their hand, except Richard Stone. He sat there, staring at his hands folded on the table, while everyone else made their choice. "Mr. Stone," I said gently. He finally looked up, and I saw something in his eyes I didn't expect. Tears. "Mr. Johnson," he said, his voice cracking, "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "This isn't about forgiveness," I replied. "This is about second chances, about the opportunity to be better tomorrow than you were yesterday. The question is, are you ready to take that opportunity?" Stone wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I've thought about that night every single day for 3 months. What I said to you, how I treated you and your wife. I was wrong. I was raised to think, to believe." He struggled for words. "But that's no excuse. There is no excuse." The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing. "I'd like to stay," he said finally, "if you'll have me. I want to help make this place what it should have been all along." I nodded. "Then welcome to the team." As I watched the staff sign their new contracts one by one, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not just for the restaurant, but for the possibility that people really could change. That sometimes the worst moments in our lives can become catalysts for the best changes. Dubois had been right about one thing. The old Le Gourmet was never coming back, but what was coming next was going to be extraordinary. Patricia approached me as the meeting was wrapping up. "So, have you decided on a new name yet?" I smiled. "I have. We're going to call it Unity." "Perfect," she said. "When do we open?" 2 weeks from today. I want to completely redecorate, revamp the menu, and retrain the staff. When we open those doors, I want everyone in this city to know that something fundamental has changed. We spent the next 14 days transforming the restaurant from top to bottom. Gone were the stuffy, old-world European decorations, replaced with artwork from local artists of all backgrounds. We repainted the walls in warm, welcoming colors. We redesigned the menu to include not just French cuisine, but dishes representing the incredible diversity of our city: soul food, Mexican specialties, Asian fusion, Italian classics. I had Stone working directly with our new diversity consultant, a professor from the local university who specialized in cultural sensitivity training. To the man's credit, he threw himself into the process, asking questions, taking notes, genuinely trying to understand how his actions had affected others. 3 days before our grand reopening, I found Stone sitting alone in the dining room after everyone else had gone home. He was staring at the space where he'd stood that fateful night, shaking his head slowly. "Everything okay?" I asked, pulling up a chair across from him. "I'm just thinking about how easy it is to become part of a system without even realizing it," he said quietly. "I spent 15 years working for Dubois, gradually absorbing his prejudices until they became my own. I didn't even see it happening." "That's how systemic discrimination works," I replied. "It's not always burning crosses and white hoods. Sometimes it's just 1,000 little decisions made day after day until treating people differently based on their appearance seems normal." He nodded slowly. "I want you to know I'm not that person anymore. Or at least, I'm trying not to be. That's all any of us can do," I told him. "Try to be better today than we were yesterday." 2 days later, we received the new sign for the restaurant's facade. Unity in elegant, simple letters, with a subtle rainbow of colors incorporated into the design. As the workers installed it over the old Le Gourmet sign, a small crowd gathered to watch. Someone started clapping, and soon the whole street was applauding. Sarah came to stand beside me on the sidewalk, slipping her arm through mine. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Like the universe has a sense of humor," I replied, "and maybe a sense of justice, too." The night before our grand reopening, I received an unexpected call. It was Roger Carlyle from the City Tribune. "Mr. Johnson, I'd like to request a reservation for tomorrow night's opening. I want to write a follow-up piece about how this story evolved." "Of course," I told him. "I'll have a table waiting for you." "There's something else," Carlyle continued. "Henri Dubois contacted me today. He asked if I thought you might allow him to attend the opening as well. Said he wants to see what you've done with the place." I paused, considering this unexpected request. "Tell him he's welcome. In fact, I'll seat him at the same table where Sarah and I were supposed to sit 3 months ago." The first chapter of the story was about a door closed in our faces because of prejudice. The second chapter was about taking ownership of that door, removing the barriers, and preparing to welcome everyone through it. But the third chapter? That was going to be the one that changed everything. This is where everything changes. The real story is just about to begin. And trust me, what happens next will make you believe in justice served ice cold. Opening night. 2 weeks later, and I'm standing in front of what used to be Le Gourmet, looking at the new sign hanging above the entrance. Unity. Simple, elegant, and exactly the opposite of everything this place used to represent. The media turnout was insane. News vans lined the street, reporters with microphones interviewing anyone who'd stand still long enough. The same college kid who'd filmed the original incident was there with his camera, live streaming to his 50,000 followers. "Y'all, this is history in the making," he kept saying. "The man they wouldn't serve is about to serve the whole damn city." Sarah stood beside me in a stunning gold dress, holding my arm tight enough to cut off circulation. "You nervous?" she asked. "Terrified," I admitted. 3 months ago, I was just an architect who wanted a nice dinner. Now I'm about to run a restaurant. Good thing you hired an actual restaurant manager." She laughed, nodding toward Patricia Williams, who was inside coordinating with the kitchen staff. The crowd outside was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Black families, white families, Asian families, Latino families. People from every corner of the city had come to witness this moment. Some were carrying signs. "Welcome, everyone. This is what justice looks like. Unity serves all." At exactly 6 o'clock, I walked to the front door, the same door where I'd been humiliated 3 months ago, and turned to address the crowd. "3 months ago, my wife and I came to this establishment to celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary," I began, my voice carrying clearly in the evening air. "We were turned away because of the color of our skin. Tonight, we're opening these doors to everyone who believes that dignity and respect should be served alongside every meal." The crowd erupted in cheers. But I wasn't done. "I want to thank someone who might surprise you," I continued, scanning the faces until I found who I was looking for. "Richard Stone, would you please come forward?" Stone emerged from the crowd, looking uncomfortable but determined. He was wearing a new uniform. No longer the coal black suit of authority, but the burgundy vest and white shirt of our serving staff. "This man treated me terribly 3 months ago," I said, putting my hand on Stone's shoulder. "He looked at me like I was less than human. But over the past few weeks, he's shown me something important. People can change. Growth is possible. Redemption is real." Stone stepped forward to the microphone, his hands shaking. "Mr. Johnson is right. I was wrong. Not just about him, but about how I saw the world. I've spent 3 months learning to be better, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure everyone who enters this restaurant feels welcomed and valued." The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. "I can't undo what I did," Stone continued, "but I can commit to never being that person again. And I can serve this community the way I should have been serving it all along." When he finished, something unexpected happened. People started applauding. Not the polite golf clap you'd expect, but real sustained applause. Then Henri Dubois appeared at the edge of the crowd. I hadn't expected to see him there. The man looked smaller somehow, wearing a simple gray sweater instead of his usual expensive suits. He stood at the back, just watching. Our eyes met across the crowd, and for a moment, time seemed frozen. Then he started walking forward through the sea of people until he stood directly in front of me. "Mr. Johnson," he said, his French accent softer now, less theatrical. "I came to apologize." The crowd went completely silent. Phones came out everywhere. "That night I showed you the worst of who I could be," Dubois continued. "I've spent 3 months thinking about why I said those things, why I believed I had the right to treat you that way. I was raised in a different time, in a different world. But that's not an excuse. There is no excuse." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. "I wanted to give you this." Inside was a check for $50,000. "It's not much compared to what I put you through," he said, "but I want it to go toward whatever charity or cause you think would make the most difference." I stared at the check, then at Dubois. "Why?" "Because I learned something these past months," he replied. "I learned that the world I thought I was protecting, where people are divided by color and class, that world is dying, and good riddance. What you're building here, this is the future. This is what I should have been building all along." I folded the check and handed it back to him. "Keep your money, Mr. Dubois, but if you really want to make amends, there's something else you can do." His eyebrows raised questioningly. "Eat dinner here tonight, as my guest. Sit at a table next to families that don't look like you, and remember that we're all just people trying to enjoy a good meal." Dubois' eyes filled with tears. "You would do that? After everything?" "That's what unity means," I said. "Everyone gets a seat at the table." As we opened the doors and the crowd began filing in, I watched something beautiful happen. Families who'd never spoken to each other were being seated at neighboring tables. The college kid was interviewing an elderly black woman about what this moment meant to her. Richard Stone was personally escorting a Latino family to their table, making sure their children had high chairs. The menu had changed too. We kept some of Dubois' French classics, but added soul food, Mexican dishes, Korean barbecue, Italian pasta, a reflection of our city's real diversity. Every dish prepared with the same care and attention, served with the same respect. Around 8 o'clock, I was making my rounds through the dining room when I noticed Stone talking to a young black couple at table 12. They looked nervous, out of place in the elegant surroundings. "Is everything all right here?" I asked, approaching the table. The young man looked up, recognition dawning on his face. "Mr. Johnson, I just wanted to say thank you. My girlfriend and I, we've never eaten at a place this nice before. Mr. Stone here has been making sure we understand the menu, recommending dishes. He's been really kind." I looked at Stone, who was beaming with pride. "That's what we do here," I said. "Everyone deserves to feel special." As the evening continued, I found myself moving through the restaurant like it was a dream. Every table was full. Every face was smiling. The same dining room that had been a symbol of exclusion was now buzzing with the energy of genuine community. Sarah found me around 10 o'clock, standing by the kitchen door, just watching the controlled chaos of a successful dinner service. "So how does it feel?" she asked, slipping her arm around my waist. "Honestly, it feels like the best anniversary gift I've ever given myself," I replied. "We turned our worst moment into something beautiful." Patricia Williams approached us with the night's receipts. "Marcus, you need to see this." The numbers were staggering. We'd served 300 covers, more than Le Gourmet's best night ever. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about what those numbers represented. A community coming together, people choosing unity over division. As the last customers were finishing their desserts, Roger Carlyle, the newspaper editor, approached our table. "Mr. Johnson, I was wondering if I could get a few words for tomorrow's follow-up story." "Of course," I said, gesturing for him to sit down. "What's your message to people who might still believe in the kind of discrimination you experienced here 3 months ago?" I thought about it for a moment, looking around at the restaurant full of happy families of every background imaginable. "I'd tell them that hate is expensive," I said finally. "It costs you customers, it costs you employees, it costs you your soul. But love is profitable. When you treat people with dignity and respect, when you welcome everyone to your table, you don't just build a business, you build a community." Roger scribbled notes furiously. "And your plans for the future?" "We're going to keep doing what we did tonight, every night. serving good food to good people, regardless of where they come from or what they look like. And maybe, just maybe, will help change hearts and minds one meal at a time. As the evening wound down and the staff began cleaning up, I found myself back at the front door, the same spot where my humiliation had turned into my motivation. Henri Dubois was one of the last to leave. He'd spent the entire evening at his table, quietly observing, occasionally chatting with other diners. As he approached the door, he stopped in front of me. "Mr. Johnson," he said, extending his hand, "thank you for showing me what this place could be." I shook his hand firmly. "Thank you for giving me the chance to show you. You know," he continued, "I spent 40 years building walls in this restaurant. In 3 months, you've torn them all down and built something better." As he walked away into the night, I realized something profound. This wasn't about revenge. It had never been about revenge. It was about transformation of a business, of a community, and of the people within it. Richard Stone approached as I was locking up. "Mr. Johnson, I just wanted to say, today was the best day I've had at work in 15 years. "Why's that, Richard?" "Because for the first time, I felt like I was actually serving people instead of just serving myself." Sarah and I walked to our car in comfortable silence, both of us processing the magnitude of what had just happened. As we drove past the protesters' old campsites, now empty, Sarah reached over and took my hand. "You know what the best part of tonight was?" she asked. "Tell me." "Watching you realize that sometimes the worst things that happen to us are just the universe setting us up for something extraordinary." 6 months later, Unity has a 3-week waiting list for reservations. We've hired 42 employees, opened a culinary training program for underprivileged youth, and donated over $200,000 to local civil rights organizations. Richard Stone was promoted to assistant manager and now travels to other restaurants, teaching diversity and inclusion training. Henri Dubois comes in every Tuesday for the senior citizen discount special, often bringing friends who've never eaten next to people different from themselves. And that college kid who filmed the original incident, he's now our social media manager, documenting every act of kindness and community building that happens within our walls. Sometimes I still think about that rainy Thursday evening when all I wanted was a nice dinner with my wife. How a moment of ugliness became the catalyst for something beautiful. How being told I wasn't someone's kind of person led me to create a place where everyone is exactly the right kind of person. The truth is, they did me a favor that night. By showing me their worst, they challenged me to become my best. By closing their door to me, they forced me to open my own door to everyone. Justice, it turns out, tastes better than anything they ever served at Le Gourmet, and it's available to everyone, no reservation required.